Another way to understand what this project is about is by knowing how it came to be. So we asked Enrique and Mariana, how was Echoes of Climate Change born?
Okay, well, probably I should go for that one.
Yes, you should.
Okay. Well, this project is very interesting because actually it is born in the center of a discussion that Mariana and I always have about incorporating different views from different disciplines. Mariana is a social linguist and me as a biologist, actually. So there's something interesting that needs to be known for this project in particular, is that contrary to other Anillos projects that in the past, this one, the call for this one was called that thematic, like a specific topic for last year, meaning that before you could present any idea that you had in mind, okay? But for last year, we had to wait until the call, so we had to adjust our ideas to the thing that the government, in this case, the state, required. So this was interesting because last year the focus was on climate change, okay, and we had to think about it like within a week, like what we were going to do with that, because we didn't know that in advance. Of course, it could be anything. It could be, I don't know, mining or some other interesting things that normally the government in Chile is interested in. So starting from there, what we decided to do was, well, we had a long conversation, and there were some things that were popping up, during the conversation. And one of them was, for example, the necessity to incorporate communities, okay? Communities, like general public first, and then communities into a research project of this magnitude. Because normally, what happens, although it has been changing, but what happens normally is that researchers in general, tend to put aside, the communities or the participants, or not to get involved too much with them. So we decided to focus on a project that will be interdisciplinary, that would incorporate communities. Of course, biodiversity, which is always a hot topic, and is part of climate change. And after many long hours of discussions and writing down and brainstorming some ideas, we come up with this idea, to study biodiversity in communities, rural communities, which is actually a hot topic here in this particular region of the country. And biodiversity, not the whole biodiversity, but agrobiodiversity, which is always involved in productive processes and cultural practices. So we integrated all this discussion into a project that basically will focus on how rural communities interact with agrobiodiversity. Okay, that was the first step. So, okay, what happens? You have this interaction, and this is normal because rural communities are always interacting with agrobiodiversity. And then we just said, okay, let us put this thing into the context of the project. And the project was asking basically how climate change would be a threat for this interaction between agrobiodiversity and rural communities. But that interaction actually was considered to be a patrimonial practice, okay, meaning heritage. Okay, so okay, here we go. I'm trying to explain again the entire process, so it makes it makes sense, So we kept on working on it, and we decided to get that. Okay, we said, look, agrobiodiversity and rural communities interact, and that out of that interaction comes something called like cultural practices, okay? Because every community interacts with agrobiodiversity in a different way. So that cultural practice is not just cultural, but it's ecocultural because it happens within an ecosystem and a particular environment. And the idea of the project, basically, which is very simple, but in the end, is to identify these interactions, okay, as heritage or patrimonial interactions, and to evaluate if these interactions could be threatened or not, no, we don't know, by climate change. Because something that has been happening in the country in the last few years is that because of climate change, which in Chile and the same as many parts of the world, it's very evident. And you can hear, if you talk to rural communities, to farmers, they will be complaining all the time. And they will say, hey, now it's more difficult for me to keep my cherries because now we have different climate and the weather can be really bad in September. And then we can suffer losses, etc. So within this context of climate change, we, with the project, are trying to identify which one of these interactions, these potential heritage interactions or important ecological interactions, can be threatened by climate change. Mm-hmm. And that's it. And then why ecos, how do you say that? Plus two ecos. Mm-hmm. The reason is because it's multidimensional, and it includes ecosystems, economy, ecocultural interactions. So you have this multidimensional aspect of the project, and that's why we decided to put that symbol there, So that's basically how we thought about the project.
As we have heard, Echoes of Climate Change has been structured as a converging point of academic and scientific concerns regarding heritage, climate, agriculture, and change. But a salient feature of what it does also comes from its engagement with people and territories, something Mariana made clear when asked about the communities the project researchers work with.
So when we applied, we proposed, I think it was 12 communities. We tried to work with communities from the north, the center, and the south to have, because we understand, like the agricultural activities in each region of the country is very different because of its geography and their economic activities as well. So we tried to have representatives from most of them, and we started by proposing to work with communities that we already knew. The team, I mean, not us, Enrique and I, but the whole team already knew, and that's because it's really hard to get into communities and to be able to work with them. We proposed participatory methodologies. We need the community to engage, with us, and we have to engage with them. We will have activities in which, obviously, we as the team, the research team, will approach them to know more about, what they are doing. But we also have activities in which they will basically be teaching us, like they will be doing. So the communities will have. They will have the opportunity to probably shift the interest of the research as well. Like if they are not, we have some ideas of what we want to achieve, and we have we have to set some goals, but we may be wrong. Like we may be thinking that these communities want to keep their practices, their ancestral practices, or the traditional practices, and we may reach the place and we may interview them and see that they are not interested in keeping those traditions, and they may be willing to like to learn something new and to move on and to evolve, and you never know what communities need until you get there, until you see them, until you talk to them. So we are open to anything, but we need to work with them, not just, like go there and interview them and then leave. So the kind of commitment with the communities is that it will be a long commitment. So we will not just go there once, but we are expecting to send, like these students to be with them, like more often, and to do activities with them, and also to do some. So with one of the communities that we are starting to do some data collection, they asked us in return to give motivational talks in schools, for example. So that's our way of paying back, like the kindness and their willingness to participate. And so we are getting involved with the schools, and we didn't, at the beginning of the project, we didn't think of schools, but that's coming up because the communities need that and they want that. So we had these 12 communities that at least one of us knew and had worked with before, but along the way, so we are coming to a close of the first year already, in a little bit more than a month. And we, because of our collaborators here in Chile, we started, like going to seminars and being invited to colloquiums and different things from different groups, different research groups, and they had offered their own communities to work with and be part of the project as well. So now I think a community from the Itata, for example, from the Biobío, from the Itata area, apparently will be part of the project as well. And we hadn't thought about that community in the beginning, so they may be a new community. Then we may have international. I think Enrique can talk about the international communities. We thought about, like doing it just in Chile, but now the opportunity came up that we may be able to use our instruments. So we are doing the pilot here, but we may be able to use the instruments we created for our own data collection and activities, and apply them and replicate our study in other countries. I don't remember which countries are involved.
Actually, it keeps on growing.
It keeps growing,
it keeps growing. We have Kenya and Mongolia, Azerbaijan. We have Colombia, Romania. Probably we'll have what's the other one? Bosnia-Herzegovina, probably as well. Okay, so we have a number of countries where rural communities would be interviewed using our instruments. And the interesting thing about this is that at some stage we will be able to compare a little bit what's going on, within, of course, different cultural contexts. But then our idea probably would be that some of the same issues are being detected all around the world in communities that are very different, by the way. Okay, like the nomads from Mongolia, Masai Mara, Masai tribes in Masai Mara in Kenya, and our own farmers here. So So this project, the Anillos project, is always about expanding, the scope and the grounds of the project. So I think we have been quite successful during this first year in setting up all the, different scenarios where we can develop our research, more deeply. So that's that's about it. Yeah.
Perhaps now it's a good point for asking, what are the main components of the project?
So what lines do we have? We have at least, the 4 main lines, which are led by the 4 main researchers. So we have 4 main researchers working on the project. Each of them will have their own thesis students, and in my case, I also direct the postdoc researcher. Enrique, I think, the biologists, Enrique and agronomists are doing the biodiversity bits, and he can talk more about that. Then I'm focusing on identities, gender, all of that kind of social construction and social practice. So the eco-cultural bit will be under my, supervision, and I will be developing it. And then we have the economic activities line as well, and that is led by Jimena Quiñones, one of our main researchers. And then we have another line that has to do with mitigation of the effects of climate change, the impact of climate change on ecocultural practices, and that's led by everybody. I mean, that's like the final goal of the Anishos project. So we hope to be able to come up with a manual, some kind of advice and a report of the state of the art of the communities and all of that. And so in terms of mitigation and adaptation to climate change, we will all be working together to achieve that last research line. But then there are other research lines that, as I have said, have probably emerged from the main research lines. And so we have storytelling coming up very strongly as well, and the storytelling of the communities. So it's not just, knowing what kind of practices they have and how they relate to these practices and to this biodiversity around them. But it's also the stories that they have to tell, stories that were passed on from, their grandparents or great-grandparents about the countryside, about the cultivations and stuff like that. They have lots of histories and, stories. And so that is coming up strongly as well. And we are doing a workshop on storytelling as part of our data collection process as well. And the postdoc, Sophia, the postdoc researcher, she's working on poetry. So it's kind of related to storytelling, but it's a different genre altogether. And she's looking at some archives in the National Library. And we are looking at, preserving those files and those archives of national poetry. We are working on trying to publish, to do something with the poetry, but it's still heritage. It's literature for country literature, and it's all from the countryside. It's all from this region, El Maule. So she focused on this region only, and I think she's got over 400 poems that we are analyzing. So it's different things come up. Others who are working with us, research assistants, for example, they are interested in the history. So we submitted a paper that looks at the role of women in terms of the land ownership, for example, in the region as well, and in the country more generally. So they are quite free, all of the researchers, to look for their own lines of research and do the things they are interested in, or see where the research takes them, really, when they approach communities, and feel free in that regard. Obviously, having following the research objectives so that we achieve what we said we would do, but still quite free to explore new things.
And what about the biodiversity component?
Yeah, well, the idea is to integrate a bit of knowledge of biodiversity, particularly thinking that there are lots of different ecosystems that are being covered in the study. So biodiversity is the main component, actually, in terms of the relation that it has with the communities. So we have there a number of ways to analyze that, ranging from visual inspections, visual surveys, moving to geographical analysis of distribution of different vegetation formations and stuff like that. It's very interesting, actually, to think that this multidisciplinary project can produce a lot of information. But one of the important things that the project is very, very focused on is that in the end, once all the mitigation, ideas are put together in this document, we will try to make it, and then this is how we say that we will try to, because it doesn't depend on us entirely, to make it into the public system. So we can actually provide information for decision-making, and public policies. And whatever government is in power and in charge in that moment, that doesn't really matter that much. But this is one of the main goals of the project, actually, to raise the voice, to say, okay, we did this, we identify these things, these problems here. There's some heritage in danger because of climate change and even other reasons. And to put that topic, that hot topic, actually, to put it into the public policy world, let us say it that way. Because otherwise, what happens is that you collect all this information, but if if nobody else is paying attention to it, probably will get lost. And that's something that we cannot allow, particularly as a commitment towards the communities that will trust us with their information. Okay, this is like a little bit like somebody inviting you into their homes. As a guest, you have to be polite and you have to not compensate, but you have to interact with them. And it's a sign of respect to make all the effort that we can make in order to get that information into proper hands and probably transform this into public policies. So we are very ambitious in terms of what we want to achieve. And I think that that's a good thing about the project. Being ambitious means that we're setting up high expectations for our outcomes. So this is basically how we are, structuring the project.
If we had to describe Echoes of Climate Change in a handful of words, we could say that it's a collective quest to understand how climate change and adaptation connect with the eco-agrodiverse heritage of rural communities. A more detailed discussion of the kinds of problems and inquiries developed within this framework will be the subject of the next part of this conversation, which is dedicated to interviewing Professor Elizabeth Beaux Berkeley, and of course in the other episodes of Echoes of Climate Change. This podcast is part of the outreach activities of the ANID ATE 230028, an Anillos research project developed by scientists and researchers from the Universidad Católica del Maule, Universidad de Concepción, and Universidad Finisterra, and it's founded by the Agencia Nacional de Investigación y Desarrollo. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Echoes of Climate Change and visit our website echoesofclimatechange.cl. Thank you, Mariana, Enrique, and Beaux for your insights and time. And thank you to all of you out there for lending us your ears. Echoes of Climate Change hace parte de las actividades interdisciplinarias de divulgación e investigación del proyecto Biodiversidad de Costa a Montaña, un estudio socioambiental de las comunidades rurales, prácticas ecoculturales en un escenario de cambio climático. Un proyecto Anillos de Investigación en Áreas Temáticas Especiales financiado por la Agencia Nacional de Investigación y Desarrollo, realizado por investigadoras e investigadores de la Universidad Católica del Maule, la Universidad de Concepción y la Universidad Finisterra.